Welcome, everyone, to EZRA Asks, the show where we tackle the big questions at the intersection of leadership, behavioral change, and the future of work. I'm Leslie Caputo, Senior Vice President of Global Solutions here at EZRA, and today's episode is all about discernment, that rare quality that separates leaders who chase every trend from those who know what truly matters. We live in a world that worships change, new systems, new models, new strategies, but the truth is that not every change is progress and not every tradition is a trap. The leaders who truly stand out are the ones who don't overhaul everything, but read the moment, protect what's core, and evolve what's not. I am thrilled to be joined by my guest today, Jay Moore, a leader who knows transformation better than most. Jay spent 37 years at GE, where he rose to become Chief Learning Officer, leading leadership and learning through multiple waves of reinvention. He's seen firsthand how legacy and innovation can collide. Since retiring from GE, Jay has trained as a coach, and he now sits on several advisory boards, including ours here at EZRA. And across his career, his focus has been consistently helping organizations grow without losing their identity. He also loves to play rhythm guitar and sings in a band. Welcome, Jay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Fantastic. I'm curious for you, with this idea of discernment and what not to change in mind, what most piqued your interest about having this conversation with me?
Oh, well, look, given everything that's happening in industry, private or public, this is just an interesting time, I'm finding, Leslie, as it relates to what are the implications with all of the technology, with all of the pace it's moving. And so for me, this conversation is how do we think about leadership development with all of those factors occurring around us?
Yeah, excellent. Well, I can't wait to dig in. Maybe before we do that, to help the audience get to know you a little bit better, a couple warm-up questions.
Okay.
So obviously here at EZRA, we are in the business of coaching. And we often talk about coaching as a way to unlock people's superpowers. What would you say is your superpower, whether personally or professionally?
So, and you're spot on as it relates to that superpower, right? Discovering what that is. I would say through my career, the area that I've been told, and I feel I'm pretty good at, is getting groups to work better together. Oftentimes, whether it was a transformation that we're all seemingly undergoing all the time, a new go-to-market approach, a new supply chain, being able to take the time to really listen to the context of which others are bringing to the table and getting them focused on the outcome rather than the conflicts that we can tend to have with each other. So I tended to be in these areas of where it was either like new for the company or there was some conflict going on, and how do we get these groups to work better together? And that's just something I've kind of learned over time. And Leslie, it might have been because I came from such a large family.
Yeah.
You kind of figure that out over
necessary.
time. It's very
for
necessary.
Survival.
Exactly.
Yes. And have 3 kids, so probably a lot
Three
of conflict
kids.
management there as
Plenty
well.
of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Incredible. Maybe a couple quick fire questions then. Would you rather have unlimited ideas or unlimited focus?
Oh, wow. It's an interesting trap. Unlimited ideas.
Unlimited ideas. Would you rather spend the day coaching or mentoring emerging leaders or having your younger self coaching and mentoring you?
Ooh, emergent leaders.
Emerging leaders.
Yes.
I guess you do a lot of that.
I do a bit of that today. I do.
Would you rather be known for bold decisions or quiet consistency?
Quiet consistency.
Yeah, that's a superpower in and of itself. True or false, reflecting back on your time at GE, was most of the learning and conversation and ideas around the water cooler?
Wow, right? Because you always have that public side of the equation that you're preparing, some even posturing, right, Leslie, in that sense. But then you look at where's the real conversation happening and where the real decision making is occurring. That can lead up to that public area. I would have to say it's more of the conversations that happen outside of that public venue. And I think there's a reason for that, Leslie. I think part of it is taking the time to really understand what's behind the decision. It may be to get somebody to be an advocate of what you're trying to get done.
Right.
It may be just trying to understand their point of view where they're disagreeing and just trying to get them neutralized to where that position may be.
Yeah.
And in many cases, it's getting the understanding of what they're facing into. So when you do go into that public environment, it's not a real surprise.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think, you have that public venue, but then a lot of that work happens, offline that you're trying to understand and then try to solve for when you get back to that public venue.
Yeah, it's so interesting as we see the shift, the pendulum swing back towards in office and how our office is being designed to really fuel learning. And is the water cooler going to come back? It's a pretty interesting thing to explore. Last one for you. Agree or disagree? The hardest part of leadership isn't making change happen. It's knowing when not to.
Yeah, I'm going to say recognizing when change doesn't have to be made.
Yeah.
Okay. Because change is going to be a constant around us.
Yeah.
And sometimes just being able to pull back and assess, right? It may just be a timing thing, right? It may just not be the time for certain changes, and other ones absolutely need you just go all in. So I think there's some wisdom as it relates to taking the pause to understand where and when for that.
Agree. Which is a perfect segue.
Yep.
That really is the conversation of the day, is this art, this craft of discernment. Rising from intern all the way to chief learning officer at GE, pretty incredible. That's nearly 4 decades of seeing transformation and reinvention unfold in real time. What kept you curious during that many cycles of change?
Yeah, right. Because you look back, I'm like, wow, 4 decades. Where did that even go, Leslie? Right? How does that even happen? Right? And I think what kept me in that game the whole time was, one, the energy around kind of the growth of the business, growth of the individuals. Right? So constant learning. I think learning probably is at its most core piece of it. Constant innovation, bringing something new to market. And even that innovation, Leslie, could be, how are we going to try a new process? How can we find a new value stream? How can we take cost out of the system? How can we improve on-time delivery, right? There was always something that we were like either pushing the needle on or advancing or even just experimenting for that matter. I think that was part of the culture, and it still is in many ways, that kept me involved through all that time. Look, great leaders as well, great teams as well. But I also think for me, part of it has been having a value system and purpose that I was really aligned with, even in the challenging cycle times of a business, because every business will go through one, the great cycles and the ones that are challenging. So for me, that embedded value system kept me through.
And what did those years teach you about balancing innovation and heritage and holding both of those things at the same time?
That's a great question, right? Because it's always that balance of, we often work with leaders around, okay, how can you look and reframe what's possible? How can you also let go? But also, how can you be respectful of where you've been?
Right.
Right? And I think all of those things are important. When I look at all of the changes that I've been through and what the company has been through up to the point of where the company was broken up, right?
Right.
I'd often ask, okay, is this foundation something that brings a lot of pride and purpose that you can see in a new light? Or is it frankly holding us back in cases, right? So I think it's always a call as it relates to, okay, let's be respectful. Let's understand and learn to understand how we got here. But it's not necessarily always going to be the thing that takes you forward. So I think there is a real leadership agenda in the sense and self-awareness as it relates to when do you actually let go? And how do you also create and get the excitement around what's in a new day ahead, right?
And how do you know? How do you know the difference or how do you know when it's time to let go?
Yeah, I like that, right? So new strategy, new set of capabilities, new direction, new marketplace, right? If you're doing things that don't serve those purposes and holds the team back, that's kind of a signal in my view as it relates to time to let some of that go. When you look at a direction, you can't always be going into the direction that it used to be.
Right.
Right, particularly when you're trying to grow out of a new cycle. Right? So my signals tend to be, Is it helping move us in the new strategy? Is it helping us move into the new culture that we aspire to be? Is it helping us into the new capabilities we're trying to drive? And are you learning and trying some new things for yourself? If it's holding those things back, that tends to be something to say, okay, let's have a conversation and determine, hey, is this new direction for you? Do you want to be a part of it?
Yeah.
Right. And you can also be very respectful in that conversation as well, Leslie.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes it becomes so clear when everything's moving forward around an individual, but that individual is just not showing the signs of moving ahead. And I'm interested with your perspective and experience now as a coach.
Yeah, right.
Which you've moved into that space. How does this look or feel different with that outside in view when you're coaching leaders who at scale are going through these types of transformations across a whole variety of contexts?
Yeah, I like that because it is a whole new lens.
Yeah.
Right. So taking the time to really go through the study of coaching, the practicum of coaching. We've always had, when I was at GE, coaching as part of our agenda. Leader as a coach, coaching skills. We'd scale off across the businesses, added into our programs. But when I was really dedicated to the study and practice, I'm like, okay, was I really going as deep into my coaching work as it's defined as it is? Am I really being as active a listener? Am I showing self-awareness to self-manage the conversation? So what I'm finding now that I'm out of that, Leslie, part of it is now just being able to help the client slow down, be intensely focused on them, right? And their topic, and not to problem solve for them. Because if I start going there, and I was raised to be a problem solver.
Right.
That's part of the area that I think for many coaches have to put to the side and really focus on the client and their topic. So now I see this, and part of my work now is to be able to help that client as I'm going through those coaching conversations, to be able to reframe and take different actions, right? That they know more about than I do.
So it sounds like a lot of personal growth for you as well, stepping into this coaching role in a post-GE world.
It really was. Originally I went into this thinking, okay, this could help my advisory work. And, and I need a new routine, and why not spend a little bit more time learning a new skill? Leslie, as I got into it, I started recognizing how much of a benefit it was to me personally in going through those experiences, because as you go through any coaching practices or certifications, you're doing a lot of peer coaching. Right. And I just found incredibly how helpful it was for me in making the time in transition that I was going through. So I'm like, what a gift, right? That is. So a completely new lens around that.
Right. And after such a tenured career at GE, to have such exposure to different contexts via your coachees, I imagine is really rewarding. So we talked a little bit about this art of discernment, and really kind of the rarest skill is knowing when not to change things. How do you help leaders, whether when you think about your time at GE or you think about coaching or advising now, how do you help leaders develop that skill of judgment, which we know with the way automation, AI are impacting businesses, judgment, discernment, critical thinking, whatever you want to call it, we know is becoming one of, if not the most important skills. How do you build that in leaders?
It's this discernment piece, right? Understanding when to make a call and when not to make a call. So much we rely so much on our experiences, as we should, but also coupled with those experiences, there's other points of view that you need to be taking in. So oftentimes in working with a client or doing reflections of my own, it's like, am I really listening to other points of view when I'm making that decision? I'm really concerned today, and it's only going to get increasingly challenging. What are my sources of truth? Because there's so much data coming at us. And then, of course, I'm also a data hound, so I need to have the data as well. So you're working with, I look at it more in how do you triangulate those signals and then make a call as it relates to how do you move forward on that decision. And sometimes, as we're describing, do we have to even make the conversation or decision now? Right. What happens if we were to wait a month? Let's say, what would happen if we made this decision in 3 months' time? What would the implications be of that? You can start having those scenarios and dialogues, and it does shape decision-making and actions. Now, at the same time, you can't do all of that analysis and just let that sit forever as well.
Analysis paralysis. Yeah.
We've seen that, right? And you've seen some of the best strategies that sit at the side
Yeah.
at the table, right? So there is always this balance of action orientation to that of the strategy analysis piece, right? And that's again some judgment call back to the discernment,
Right.
moving the agenda forward at a pace that your teams and customers can take. And sometimes you want to be provocative and push just to kind of test those walls as well, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like the notion of triangulating. So it sounds like making sure you have multiple data sources,
Right.
the perspective of many other people, playing with the time boundaries of a decision. Is this a now decision? Can we sit on this decision? All ways to sort of exercise that judgment muscle.
You played that well, and that playback is spot on,
Okay.
right? And think about often how you and I and others that work with leaders, there's always this gap to what leaders are making decisions on, and we're paying those leaders for their experiences and judgment calls, but yet that gap to what the front line is feeling.
Yeah.
Right? So our job is helping those leaders understand, are you getting those sources right up into, in front of the customer, right? How are you getting those points of view? Because when things fail, somebody in that organization probably knew that answer.
Right. Did
Right.
you talk to them or not?
So
Right.
are you engaging with them, or are you listening enough to those voices to be able to avoid or reduce those failures?
Yeah, I think we as a world and as a corporate world have gotten pretty addicted to change.
Yeah.
And this idea of speed and how quickly we can move and shift. But what's the risk when companies are just making change to look modern
Yeah.
and adapt versus actually genuinely making change to get better?
Yeah. So my response to that is eventually reality catches up,
Yeah.
right? So you can put on the facade, but your brand will erode really quickly when that brand promise isn't fulfilled,
Yes.
right? And I think that also holds true for us as employees and as leaders as well,
Sure.
right? That whole notion of say, do. What are my actions showing to what I'm actually saying I was going to do? So that for me is like a really important piece, because in this world right now where every day, every hour, new conversation about AI
Yes.
and how companies are investing, companies are making productivity gains, companies are seeing improved customer service. We're having agents as part of our leadership agenda as far as how do we manage. But then when you start digging layers down, is the productivity really being achieved? Is the customer service promise being fulfilled in our interactions with our consumers, right? So for me, it's always about the reality that you can only watch that for so long, and you can only make that promise for so long, and then reality catches up to you.
Right. I think particularly with AI, we're seeing just people jumping to answers when the reality is we don't know about a lot of these
That's right.
things, right? We don't know exactly what the future holds because it's impacting us so quickly and so furiously. And people are just in a race to, I think, prove that they know, but we're almost overshooting in some ways when the reality is we
Absolutely.
kind of need to prepare ourselves, but also wait and see
That's
a bit
right.
before we make these massive sweeping changes.
That's right. And perfect example, right? So look at how fast this technology is being drawn. And it's actually, it's part of the excitement for me, Leslie, is actually seeing what it can do.
Yeah, right? It's
But
exciting
yet,
sometimes.
yeah, right. And it can also be really bad at sometimes
Yeah,
too, right? So you've kind of got
totally.
these two parameters that you're working with. But I think that's, again, our responsibility as it relates to what are we doing personally to, learn and apply ourselves? What are we doing with our teams to be able to say, okay, I'd love to hear how you're applying this in your work. Let's test something out. Let's all learn together as we go along. Now you're sifting through what it can really do and what it can't. We have had a lot of technology advances over the decades, right?
Yes.
And we could always discern when people are saying, okay, I'm applying this technology, but is it really organically from you? And do you really have full understanding of that problem? And I think that's the case today. I can tell in seconds whether a PowerPoint page was just generated by somebody in 30 seconds,
Yes.
or somebody actually gave some content and thought and expression, leveraged a tool to help you summarize, improve the look, right? There's, again, great uses for that. But I can usually discern, does somebody really know what they're talking about in that conversation? Or are they just putting it out just to put it out? It will catch up with somebody at some point in time around that. So that's part of our job as leaders, is be involved so you know.
Right. I had a similar experience the other day. Someone sent me a draft to review, and they said to me, and don't worry about ripping it apart because it came from ChatGPT. And I said, well, that's not my expectation.
Right.
My expectation, having had encouraged this employee to use AI
Right.
to help produce the deliverable, my expectation is that you're using it to leapfrog to a first draft, but that you're not simply sliding that draft across the desk to me, that you are in conversation with AI, you are iterating with AI and thought partnering, and that your discernment helps evolve that draft into something more high quality, and you've done it more efficiently because you partnered with AI. But that's not assumed today when people think about using AI for work outputs. It seems like that's something we really need to develop.
Yeah, that's a great example. And that's one where, that employee is one of many.
Right.
Right. In
It's
due
happening a
respect.
lot.
That's happening a lot. And like, first reaction can be, what, do you want me to work on your draft?
Right.
Right. So you have like that personal reaction.
Yeah.
But then you also have the reaction of, no, we want your critical thinking and iteration.
Yes.
And it's really interesting, particularly when you get into the university system, right? Professors will be asking their students to say, okay, here are the rules of engagement with the tools, but I want to see where you started and where you ended. And what did you think about from a critical thinking perspective that got you from A to B with your output? And I think that's the important piece with this.
Showing your work.
It's showing your work.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you'll hear work, the words human in the loop. It's the iteration of that. And I do think it helps improve cycle time. It helps summarize incredible insights, right? That you and I wouldn't have been able to do. It would take us hours on end. But we still have a judgment and expertise and experiences that we rely on that's going to shape it contextually to the problem we're solving for.
Yes.
Right? And that's the value that we bring as part of it. The value that the tool brings is being able to do that summation for us.
Right. So human and AI together.
Yes.
And AI is just one example of how the pace of change has necessitated greater discernment. But whether it's globalization or reskilling or hybrid work, how do you think, if at all, the shape of leadership has needed to change in response to the pace of this reinvention?
Right, because you just think even 5 years ago, Leslie, one could say, hey, it was a lot easier than it was today around that. A lot of what I read, a lot of what I see, and then the experience of just what this environment's like is drawing some conclusions of leaders just, and you could argue 100 years ago, they don't have all the answers, right?
Of course, yeah.
So I think, and I am coming to forming some conclusions as I've been working with EZRA and my own coaching practice. I think it's requiring leaders to have more coach-like skills. Because there's so much data there today. Things are moving so quick. You won't have all the answers all the time. So it's requiring more coach-like skills. And what I mean by that is having some humility, being able to listen, have some self-awareness, and being able to actively engage with employees from that surround whatever problem you're trying to solve to be able to get to that decision making. So this notion of, I think I can just answer everything at all times and make the best call, I think those days are slowly. And look, a leader has to own the decision, has to own the priorities, and ultimately has to make the call and ownership of that, right? But I think it is different as it relates to how you gather the data and from whom in making those decisions today.
It's an interesting dilemma or paradox to think we have answers at our fingertips and leaders do more than ever, and yet that's almost making it harder to make decisions.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
It's really interesting because there's so much, right? It's like, great, I have all the information I could ever have at hand, but am I lacking in a space of functional expertise that is a blind spot I may have?
Yeah.
And study after study has proven the more diverse of a group of people surrounding a problem is going to make a better decision than one alone.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, totally. And you're drawing on something that's become quite a hot topic here at EZRA with all of our clients that they've been asking. It sounds like it's been coming up for you a lot in your own coaching and work, which is with the sheer volume of information at our disposal, with all of this AI tooling, what is the truly human side of leadership that needs to get even stronger? And we've been talking about discernment. You just raised humility. The research shows that's a big one, knowing when you don't know the answers. Resilience, curiosity, and emotional intelligence is what we're seeing what we're calling the human skills dividend. How does that resonate with what you're hearing in your work?
It resonates greatly.
Okay.
Right. So then, well, how do we keep developing that?
Yeah.
And I do think for leaders, part of it is being a bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? And admitting you don't have all of the answers as it relates to the way you show up and the way you make decisions today. Here's something we already know. A year from now, the technology is only going to improve. 5 years from now, it's going to be even more advanced. Mm-hmm. So what is the human factor that helps manage that dynamic? Right? So those areas that you're describing, I think the human side is going to become even more important.
I do too. And those are all behaviors and skills that are obviously paramount to coaching. And you're talking about being more coach-like. And it's been interesting to look inward here at EZRA around our own use of AI coaching versus human coaching.
Yes.
And I'm not going to lie, I had a period where I said AI coaching is going to take over the world. But the more I see people grappling with the challenges, the more I see my own team working through it, the more I think human coaching, well, there is a time and a place, and AI coaching is profoundly valuable and really helps build skills and create practice environments. I think human coaching is actually only going to become more important and more desirable for people who want a break and a space to just have a human conversation.
You hit upon it exactly. I think that break in the space is really important to underscore. Because of the fray and the environments that people are working in. That's like one of the biggest gifts I'm finding is just helping people slow down.
It's a gift, you're right.
Is to be able to slow down and process all of this that's coming at you. You also made another point, Leslie, I think is really important, right? And that is coaching tools today from an AI perspective. I think we need to do a better job defining that because in some cases it's mentoring. And sometimes it's performance support, right?
Totally.
It's not true coaching in the way that we think about it for those that are in that discipline. But if I did two, and there's a great place for that as well, right? Because it's helping me role play. It's helping me. Somebody characterized this. I was just out in Switzerland a month ago, and they characterized it. It's being used for in the moment. I need to practice.
Sure.
So if I did on one level, a time dimension, low, high, and complexity, low, high, right now that AI coaching fits right in that nice corner of lower complexity, in the moment time.
I see.
Human, in some cases, we're working with clients for 6 to 9 to 12 months, and it can take a period of time to find and some like that breakthrough at times, right? So I think about this in the sense of, okay, as that time dimension and complexity dimension improves with AI, what's our role from a human coaching perspective? I don't have all the answers to that, but I do know how these two work together are going to be increasingly more important. And if that can free up some of the space of in the now, in the moment, and we can go a little bit deeper in the human side, and we're working with both, I think there's some good that can come out of that.
I love that. Our clients have been asking us quite a bit around where do you best apply human coaching and AI coaching. And I think I love the idea of thinking about it as time and complexity. That's a really kind of practical framework people can use to think about that.
Good.
That's very cool. I want to go back to this idea of change, when not to change. And given your tenured career at GE, legacy is often a bad word sometimes or treated as dead weight. What is your perspective on what's the right way to honor history without getting stuck in it? We sort of started there, but any examples from your time at GE around this concept of legacy?
Yeah, so many on legacy. Look, we ended up spinning off the company, right? It was broken into 3 distinct, the age of the conglomerate for GE was done.
Yeah.
At the time with the team of great leaders, we managed this corporate university by the name of Crotonville. So many in the learning space, it's like heralded space. It was one of the first corporate universities in the United States. And I remember early on as we were talking through what's going to be the future of Crotonville, because friendships were born, leaders were born, engaging with the CEO. I mean, just so many stories relative that people have such great fond memories for. And I remember this dialogue, and I'm like, okay, is it a foundation or is it an anchor? And in the case for, I think, the go forward, they considered it more of, that's a legacy that we prefer to leave behind. There are some practical cost implications, et cetera.
Sure.
But we want to see ourselves in a new day. But we're going to respect the fact that we're still going to continue the tradition of learning in our 3 businesses. So that legacy went from just a physical place to what are we going to continue to invest in? That's been a legacy of the company for decades. Right? So really hard decision that had to be made for the company, but one that I thought was done in a really respectful way, in a way that was more future forward in that. I mean, that's just one example, Leslie, where that tradition carried forward in a new light for where the businesses were going. So employees could still retrospect and be proud of the past, but also still be engaged with, we're still going to be invested upon and in going forward.
I had the unique privilege of getting to visit Crotonville in its heyday, and it was a magical place. I remember getting to visit the kitchens that you had on site, where you would do leadership development workshops and do things in an executive team, for example, where they would leave out an ingredient and see if the executive team could figure out how to make something, or if they could spot the flaw in the system. And I'm curious if you think we'll return to those types of experiential learning in this environment.
It's really interesting, right? Because particularly, so COVID really accelerated the virtual side. And I always think there's something that's good, things that can be a bit challenging that come out of those cycles, because we tend to we go really hard onto one area of discipline, right? Let's go all virtual.
Right.
And then kind of, ignore what we did in the past and somehow get back into some equilibrium around that. It changed the art of the possible in many ways, which I think is really exciting. I mean, look at the work of EZRA, right? We've been able to scale out across the globe coaching that we otherwise wouldn't have available to our employees, right? Yeah. We're changing the definition of how coaching's applied within an organization and what that can bring to a company. There's good in that.
Yeah.
Right? But there are some times where we just need to see each other beyond the screen and have a conversation. I talk about this in terms of like the learning community. I haven't seen anyone yet dial in exactly, okay, what are all the parameters of where it's like, okay, this has to be face-to-face, right? And get it done, right? We're getting better at trying to size those things up. But I do find like the times we do get together, what does make me pause upon, Leslie, it's like it's not as often as we do have those moments. So what are we doing to make sure we honor every moment of time that we have together?
Yes.
And usually that tends to be just as soon as people start seeing each other, you can see already that magic occurring when they are back together. So it's going to be a balance. We're not going to go back to the way we had always done that. We don't need to. But I think it's always going to be cherished. And it's our job to make sure that when we do have that time together, how are we curating that experience to be the best experience that we have?
It's such a good question. And I agree. It's only going to become more important the same way we talked about how people are going to want to break to interact with a human coach and really have that processing and reflection time.
Right.
That people want that in a team environment as well. But it's hard to quantify the impact. You spoke a little bit about the magic that happens. And in a very lean environment where a lot of our clients are being asked to do more with less, I'm hearing them say they're really struggling to quantify the value that we all know is there from bringing people together. I was just in LA with a client the last 2 days who it was the first time their learning leadership team had been together in 8 years. There were people meeting each other face to face for the first time. Do you have any advice for our clients, others, how to argue the case or the ROI of the magic of bringing people together?
Yeah, you get into this area of value and ROI. That is and has been and always will be the conversation amongst talent and learning leads, right? And the reality is one size doesn't fit all. Yeah. It's very situational. Depending upon your leaders, you may have some leaders that just believe in it. they just believe that was the way they kind of grew up in their system, and they just believe in it, and they see the power of that. Others, it could be a really challenging business cycle, or it's just, we just never did that. So I think you have to be really clear on the outcomes and what it can achieve in those moments. But then when you do use that time, how can you repurpose and leverage that moment for the balance of the year? I'll give you an example. I had one very senior executive, new team. We did something as simple as a new manager assimilation and priority setting. And we did a lot of work up front. And that leader in particular was just like super self-aware, knew this was a moment where it's like, this is the first time we're getting this team together. So how do I show up in a really authentic way, somewhat vulnerable way? And that day and a half changed everything for them for the year.
I bet, yeah.
They had, because they saw that leader in a new light, they got to know each other in a way that was off the screen. And they used that moment to remind themselves how to keep themselves accountable and sustain that through the balance of the year.
Yeah.
So I would just say, focus on the outcomes. Look at how do you sustain that. This is oftentimes, if you're in a lean community, Leslie, for example, you're always looking at a Kaizen of where you're at the place of work and getting the problem solved in that time frame. You're always looking at sustaining that. So look at that moment and how do you continue that to make sure that that impact continues to go through the year. And then be really critical of what would you do differently the next time you're together as well.
Get more value and tell the story and be loud about it. Before I move on, I want to talk about speed in a moment. Are there any other traditions that you had in your 37-year tenure at GE that you feel like modern companies today could really learn from, that you hold sacred when you reflect on your time at GE?
Yeah, right. So a lot of different leaders, right? A lot of different disciplines throughout that time. You know, for Jack Welch, a lot of that was performance management and Six Sigma being driven into the organization, operational excellence. And a lot of those traditions carry through into the following decade. With Jeff Immelt, it was the growth agenda, the globalization efforts. So we had to bring in sales and marketing skills and product development skills into the organization. Portfolio management was big for the decade that Jeff was in his tenure. And then with Larry Culp, it was lean is the strategy. Right? Safety, quality, delivery, cost, right? So when I look at all of those leaders and I look at those decades and times that and Larry Still and you know, from an aerospace perspective, leading in that next decade tenure, you know, it was the right leader, right moment, right disciplines in their times, right? But what kind of permeated through all of this, and I think it still does today in each of the three divisions, is just this willingness to learn and give back to others across the organization. I just loved it. And it's, by the way, never perfect. And we've had our challenges as a company for sure, right?
Everyone does.
Everyone does. But even with that, even with the alum of the company, the willingness to say, okay, hey, Leslie, I'm having a real challenge in my division. And I know you have some expertise, your team does. Can we spend some time with you? So I always felt like there was this obligation of, there's going to be a time, if I look at a normal distribution curve, there's going to be times where I'm ahead of the curve or I'm behind the curve. And my job is to help shift that mean. So how do I do that organizationally and be open-minded to help others, but also, you know, be willing to help myself? So that notion of speed and operational excellence and accountability, I think that's one that's always transcended. And what each leader had to kind of watch out for is when we said, this is where we're going, we're just going to go really fast. And that can be really good. It can also be bad at times too, if you really don't know the discipline and the strategy that you're going after.
Yeah. So it sounds like there was always a red thread and an appreciation for what came before. But as you describe it, they really were chapters with new strategies and new behaviors required, but with an honor of the legacy.
That's exactly right. And always known and has to be known for innovation and what it brings to the world, right? Being very customer centric, right? And doing big things, stuff that like really matters, right? So that purpose has always been integrated through all of those times.
Yeah, and it's an interesting reference point back to, as you talked about, your own evolution as a leader and how you had those values that you stayed true to
Right.
over the course of the chapters, and then the organization had those values that you
Right.
stayed true. It's so important to have those anchors to keep you focused on the right thing.
Always.
You started talking about speed a little bit, and,
Yeah.
and I think, speed is in many ways the new status symbol.
It really is.
But there's a difference between momentum and movement. How do you help leaders strike that balance between moving fast and thinking clearly?
Yeah, and that discern, you just described the momentum, right, and movement and thinking clearly. Look, I could maybe box this in things. Operationally, as you're running your shop, you're running your business, there are just going to be some things that require immediate decisions. For example, when I was managing the global supply chain, we knew which manufacturing lines would be running to hit on-time delivery targets and ones that weren't, so we'd make adjustments in course.
Mm-hmm.
You knew if there was an integrity issue, you don't wait.
Right.
You just go. Right? Those are fast. Performance issues, some can be like in the moment, other ones can be like an ongoing coaching environment.
Yeah.
So I think whenever we're faced with, okay, we are putting in a new strategy or we're going to try a new model, a new revenue model, this is where, again, experience and time judgment, where you can say, yep, this one's an easy one, low resources, easy to do. I've heard all the voices. Impact, you manage the risk profile,
Right.
you go. The other areas, you're looking at all of those risk factors. You're looking at, and as you described this momentum piece, it got me thinking, Leslie, you think about like the global scale. Like fast for a global scale business can be a lot smaller than a small shop.
Sure. Yeah.
And I knew that, hey, if we, and you often hear go slow to go fast, right? In an organization, you'll oftentimes hear that. I knew that if I could work with all of the regions and the products and the stakeholders and do my due diligence offline, as you were talking about, we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
That's just going to get me faster for when we actually have to go to execute.
Right.
Because I knew the scale and what we would have to do was just so much broader and bigger. And I think there is also this correlation between size of change and time of effort that you have to put into that change. It's even like disassembling like conflict. If it's like a big conflict in an organization, you're going to have to put some more time in disentangling that and understanding that versus other ones that, it was just a misunderstanding. We could patch it on and we move forward. So there's this time dimension. I think there's this global scale dimension that you have to take into account when you're making the big changes. And oftentimes when you look at things that are like culturally based, larger leadership capabilities on a global scale, they're going to take time. I mean, it took us 3 years to really scale out some of the lean legacy and activities that Larry Culp was after. But it was very methodical and very purposeful. But we knew you always had to have a starting point.
Right.
Right?
And you didn't want to break anything.
And you didn't want to break it going along the way, because you can break it along the way as well.
You can. And it's interesting hearing you so thoughtfully describe the different categories of decisions and how they require a different approach, the different planes around time.
Right.
What risk or what do you think is the danger of treating every decision like it's time critical? Because I think we are in an environment right now where we're treating it that way.
And again, you have so much data coming at you.
Yeah.
The danger is making a bad decision, right?
Right.
I mean, being as simple as possible.
Yeah.
You're making just a bad decision, or you're making a decision that may not have implications today, but have implications 6 months down the road or 12 months down the road.
Yes.
And this is where, talking about the coaching aspects of this, in a coaching conversation, as you're reframing, as you're slowing down the conversation for that client, you're having them think through, what would that impact be to you in 3 months' time, in 1 year's time? And it's amazing what a night of thought can do for one.
Yeah.
To clarify.
You don't often hear people say, I'm going to sleep on it anymore.
Right? Now, again, if there's an accident or an EHS, those you act upon, right? Given. So let's just take that away. Yeah. But this notion of, can I sleep on it? That will probably frustrate some people.
Yeah.
Or you know what, Leslie, can I get another point of view for somebody that's actually closer to this than I am?
Yeah.
some of that I think you can manage by just setting the right expectations.
Sure.
Right? If you can get some agreement as it relates to, okay, what are the implications if we don't make this decision right now? Can it wait a week? Can it wait a month? Can it wait 6 months, right? A year? If you can get people bounded as to, okay, I got an expectation where it's like, it doesn't have to be tomorrow. Because most of us show up where we just want to do well and do right, be quick, be responsive.
Yeah.
But that's where a leader, I think, who has some wisdom can actually, it's like, let's make sure we're all aligned as it relates to what the timing is for what's required here in this. And by the way, I actually respect the time that you have in your life outside of work. There's going to be a time when I need to know. There's going to be a time where I'm going to have to reach out to you. But I'm not going to start sending requests and voicemails, etc., only on my hours. Because that in itself is just really unhealthy. And I've worked with leaders where it's the Saturday morning show of emails.
Yeah.
And you ask yourself, is it really necessary?
Right.
And you see kind of what's the behaviors around that, and having to raise it to that leader's attention to say, why are we even doing this? Because if it's needed and it's affecting an employee or a customer, game on.
Yeah.
But to do this every Saturday now, right? So I think as leaders, we have to be incredibly mindful of this more so than ever.
It's an important point because I think often when we think about this obsession around everything, every decision being the most critical, you think about the way you're absorbing the need to make a decision, but leaders have so much power in being clear around what's an urgent decision versus not. And what you're bringing up for me is with everything that we're talking about, the speed, the need for speed, the every decision being the most important, the sheer volume of data coming at us, there's a human cost to all of this. And there's a big piece around energy and sustainability. And as I was digging into some of the research around with the rise of automation, what's the most important human skill that we need to develop? There was a lot that came up around just capacity. We really can't get much more out of our people from a capacity, from a bandwidth perspective, right? So we need to increase their capacity to do things differently. How can leaders restore their energy and confidence without losing progress and to increase that capacity?
Yeah, you bring a couple really good things in that question. One was, if everything's critical, then nothing's critical, right? So focus and prioritization is increasingly important for all of us. And again, I'm not perfect, so let me just state that for any of my colleagues and friends in past situations. But I remember some leaders where it's like, okay, there's a list, you've got 10 priorities. And I would put a dotted line to say, here's what I view as the top 5 out of the 10. Is this where you want my energy? And it's this really fine line, Leslie, right, between stretch and burnout.
Sure. And just asking the question, just even the way you phrased it around, not is this the most important priority, but is this where you want my energy? It's the language is important.
And think about this discretionary, I call it discretionary effort we give. Like when you're in a really high performing team with a supportive leader, and you're in a business where whether it's an upcycle or downside, you're just like making some momentum, right? You're getting some gains. You're all focused on that. Your discretionary effort goes even higher. So you actually get more out of the team, right? Sure. Versus if you kind of tamp that down and, people don't want to speak up and just getting like the basics done. I think it goes a lot back to understanding where they're at, and are you being reasonable as the leaders to what the expectations are? And then having the courage to go back to say, this is where we're spending our time. Yeah. And by the way, if we don't, here's the trade-off that we're making together as a leadership team in doing this. Sure. Right? And that takes some courage. It takes some conviction. It takes some data. It takes a track record with that. I had some incredible teams across the globe. In nearly all of my one-on-ones that I would have, usually the first 15 minutes, unless it wasn't like an urgent employee, customer, was, how are things going on in your space right now? And you can share whatever it is that you're comfortable in sharing. Those relationships meant more to me, and just understanding the work that they're doing in the context and the challenges they have, the numbers came behind that. So it wasn't always numbers first. That's at least
Yeah,
the
people
point.
first.
We have our app reviews. We're going to go through our KPI, but that's like in the standard public form. We got that.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing my one-on-ones and it's people first, right?
Changes the game.
Everything else comes. I have proven that time and time again. So I would just encourage leaders as it relates to just being aware of that. And I think being aware of the way you're wired and your capacity may not be that of your teams.
Well, speaking of that,
Right.
your capacity, what do you do personally to restore your energy when you're feeling burnt out?
It's so important, right? So exercise, I just like make sure that stays first and foremost.
Protected.
Protect that space. It goes back to where am I spending my time, right? So I'm really choiceful on where I spend my time, because when I spend that time, I want to make sure I'm showing up my best
Right.
for that client, for whatever that environment is, right? So I'm mindful of that. I'm getting more mindful. I probably could have done a better job of this, Leslie. It's like, why now? Why, right? So, I remember as I started out, coming out of this fast track of running, I'd be setting up my own personal KPIs. I'm like, are these the right KPIs? Have a little grace for yourself in that. So I do find the time and with my hobbies, etc. with that. And I also know there are going to be moments in time where it's like, you're going to be on the road for 3.5 weeks. So just enjoy it, right? And make moments around that. But look, just be recognizing that you're going to be tired through that as well. So I'm really forceful of that. But when I was with my teams, I was constantly gauging to understand kind of the breadth of what is going on in the world. Again, to what's comfortable and appropriate for them to share, because there's a life outside of the work that people bring to the office. And sometimes they have extra capacity. Sometimes they're dealing with situations that they need more time for themselves. And to help them through that.
It's so important. And obviously we're in Q4 right now when we're
we're
filming this.
Right,
and I was talking to my dear colleague Dana the other day, and she's in a sales role, and she was telling me her coach said to her, after she had described that she'd been all over the country for numerous events and so many meetings, and her coach paused and said to her, so when's your recovery period scheduled for? And she was like, what's that? And this notion of athletes do it all the time.
That's right.
Right? What is a recovery period, and how can you intentionally build it in? Because if you don't take that time, you're just going to keep going and you're going to burn out.
You will burn out. And you're getting back to this notion of how do we as leaders, how do we actually take some of these areas of pause and reflection and actually codify it into our day-to-day habits? Yeah. Right? So back to where I'm seeing more of these coach-like skills coming into play. How do you actually build into your cadence once a week where you're putting in that time to just slow it down?
Yes.
Slow the pace down just a little bit. And then also being mindful, like when I'm up with a client, as it relates to, do you need a moment now? Do you need just a little bit of a break to make sure that you're here with me?
Yeah.
Right in the conversation? And how many times people are coming into the call like a minute late because they just got off that call and then they have the next one lined up. It's like, Leslie, do you just need like a moment?
Take a moment.
Take a moment. Do you need to get a water or a tea or whatever? And those few minutes can do everything in changing the outlook and the gauge of the conversation. So I think it's a really important part, this recovery notion.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm trying to be mindful of it myself. So we've been on quite the journey.
Yeah.
We've talked about the art of discernment, how we make more thoughtful decisions, the pace of change, honoring legacy while also encouraging reinvention, but being really mindful about where it's appropriate versus where kind of holding on to some of these guiding principles or core values can help us. When you look back, is there a value or behavior that you're proud that you really held the line on, even when others wanted to move on?
Yeah. So I would say it was always doing right for the customer or our employees, right? I never got into, let me be in the front of the presentation that, the charades people can play.
Yeah.
with with that, right? I want to make sure I was always prepared,
Yeah.
very transparent. That's for me, I think just being authentic and just being really consistent helped me navigate. I mean, goodness, I've said 4 divisions of plastics. I worked at NBC Universal. I worked at GE Healthcare. I worked for headquarters divisions in different roles. And some people will ask, well, geez, how did you get through all of those and still come out the other end? And I think just that consistency of like when I would work with you, there was no hidden agenda. And then I'm going to take the time to understand what we're trying to solve for. And look, when we hit something that I disagree with, we're going to have a discussion. Or if we need to make a call and I need to make a call as a leader, I make the call, but I'm going to explain the why.
Sure.
And I'm going to bring you along with me. I think those were qualities that help. And by the way, I modeled that from so many different places of either family and friendships or at university or leaders that I really respected inside the company or outside of the company. But you kind of make it your own because we're always in this kind of interesting mix of you need to go forward as a leader with the leadership capabilities of the company and the values that they instill. And that's why it's so important when I work with clients to say, do you really understand the culture of that organization? Because it may or may not be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And then how do you stay genuine to still who you are as a person? Right? Did I give up some promotions because I didn't act in a certain... Yes.
Right.
But I'm okay with that trade-off, right? But I think that also kind of helped me, throughout all of this. And fortunately, I still have many friends and acquaintances from that time that helped me become who I am today. But I think those were the qualities that probably would shine most through that.
That's so lovely. And it's a nice bookend to, in the quick fire at the start, I asked you, would you rather be known for making bold decisions or quiet consistency? And you said quiet consistency. And I think that really comes through as one of your keys to how you've been so successful is honoring that.
Yeah, it made me dwell on when I, quarter after quarter, because I've been in sales jobs, I've been in marketing jobs, I've been in global supply chain jobs, and I've been in the leadership development side in a few different capacities. And I always thought about the leaders that would kind of move along the way. So much of it was about how consistent are you, both on your leadership, but then on the output. Right?
It's so interesting. It's making me think for the first time that might be another one of those human skills that in a world that's changing so quickly becomes incredibly important is just consistency of behavior. We don't often talk about that as a skill, but it takes emotional regulation and control.
It takes a huge amount of that. Like some of the best one-on-one conversations I'd have would be when my team would actually push back on me in a strong way. It would actually, fire me up a little bit, but I'd do everything I could not to show that. And then if something failed that was under my leadership, taking the time to see, where did I actually play in that failure? And then hearing those realities and truths from that, my team felt comfortable and sure to say, they're right.
With reflection.
So if I immediately attacked or changed or, that consistency piece, people are going to hold back. But if I come to you, Leslie, as my people leader, and I know that I've got something I'm really trying to solve for the company, and I know you're there to help solve it for me time and time again, I'm just going to keep showing up, and I'm going to grow more with you in that relationship that's going to have better outcomes. I'm just convinced of that.
It's a virtuous cycle, right?
It is.
The consistency creates safety, which creates people bringing you information. And as we talked about, the Act of Discernment, one of your first points was you need the breadth of information to be able to make good decisions. We are at the end of our time, and I'm wondering, to close us out, if there's one thing that you want leaders to take away from this conversation, one shift you'd love to see in how leaders are leading today, what would that be? Yeah,
so I would say one, take that moment of pause. Take that moment of pause and recognize the way you're leading today will have to change in those realities around us, right? Think through with the rapid change that you have as a leader, that as you're engaging with your teams, they're not going to be in the same space that you're in. So being respectful of that, I think, is really important. And then also looking at what are some of the things you could be doing as it relates to being a bit more, humble, being a little bit more vulnerable, to be more of a learner in this aspect. If you could look at some of those dials as you go into the new year, I think it's just going to be helpful for you and for your team as it relates to how you work together and solving in a really dynamic workforce and environment that we have, Leslie.
Yeah. Noble and wise advice. Wisdom isn't always a word we hear so much of these days, but wisdom for sure. So take a
Thank you.
pause, be humble, be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think these are incredibly important. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Jay.
Leslie.
I learned a lot in
Thank
this
you.
conversation. I really appreciate your time, and we look forward to partnering with you more.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to spend this time with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you to our audience for being here today. If today's conversation sparked something, please share it with a colleague, send us your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe. We will see you next time on EZRA Asks.